here is a question that will stay with you. You are an angel. You have never sinned, never doubted, never felt the weight of a desire you could not control. You exist in a state of perfect light, and from that light you look down at humanity and you are confused. How could they be so weak? How could they choose this lust, greed, betrayal, destruction over the obvious luminous, over the clear, available, radiant path? And God in His wisdom says to you,
Go. Find out.
Harut and Marut descended into Babylon. They did not come as conquerors. They did not come as prophets. They came as a test. And what unfolded in the dust and heat of ancient Mesopotamia is one of the most shattering, most quietly devastating stories in the entire theological tradition of Islam. A story about knowledge that destroys, about power that corrupts, about two celestial beings who, when faced with the same temptations they had once struggled to comprehend in mankind, discovered something they had never expected. Themselves, of all the cities on this earth, God chose Babylon. Not Jerusalem, not Mecca, not Rome, not Alexandria or Athens or Nineveh. Babylon, seat of empire, crucible of civilization, birthplace of astronomy and mathematics, and the kind of knowledge that blurs the line between science and sorcery. A city whose very name, for thousands of years across dozens of cultures, became shorthand for a single idea, the place where humanity reached too far. Into this city, its streets already thick with magic practitioners, its temples already humming with forbidden ritual, its libraries already filled with incantation texts and divination manuals, God sent two angels. They walked among men. They looked like men. They breathed the same dust, drank the same water from the Euphrates, felt the same sun hammering down on the Mesopotamia, and they carried inside them a secret so powerful that God required them, before they shared it with anyone, to speak a warning so stark, so unambiguous, it could not be misunderstood. We are only a trial. Do not disbelieve. Do not use this. It will cost you everything. And every single person who heard that warning asked, this is not a story of angelic failure. This is a mirror. And the face looking back from it is ours. To understand Harut and Marut, you have to begin where the Islamic tradition begins, with a single passage. Surah Al-Baqarah, the second and longest chapter of the Quran, verse 102. It is, by any measure, one of the most extraordinary passages, dense, layered, the kind of verse that scholars spend entire careers inside, emerging with new questions each time. It describes how certain people, the passage specifically references some among the people of the book, abandoned the book of God and followed instead what the devils used to recite during the reign of Solomon the prophet. And it makes an immediate and emphatic clarification. Solomon did not disbelieve. Solomon was not the source of the corruption. The corruption came from elsewhere, from those who taught magic. And then the verse does something unexpected. It turns to name two specific beings. And they followed what the devils had recited during the... It was not Solomon who disbelieved, but the devils disbelieved, teaching magic to the people and what was revealed to the two angels, Harut and Marut, at Babylon. They taught no one until they said, "We are only a trial, so do not disbelieve." And people learned from them that by which they cause separation between man and wife. But they do not harm anyone through it except by permission of Allah, and they learn what harms them and does not benefit them. And they knew that whoever purchased it would have no share in the hereafter, and wretched is that for which they sold themselves, if they only knew. Read that again slowly. God reveals something divine knowledge to two angels. Those angels descended to Babylon, and before teaching anyone what they carried, they issued a mandatory, "This is a trial. Do not disbelieve. This knowledge will cost you your soul. And humanity, warned completely and clearly and upfront, humanity learned anyway, and used it to tear families apart. This is the architecture of the story. This is its skeleton. And every question the verse raises, why angels? Why Babylon? Why magic? Why specifically the separation of every single one of those questions is intentional. The Quran is not a book that wastes details. We're going to go through every one of them. Why angels? Why Babylon? Why magic? 3 questions pressing against this story like fingers against glass. Let us take them in order. Why angels? In Islamic theology, angels, the Malaika, are created from light. They do not possess a nafs in the way human beings do. Not the nafs al-amra, the commanding self that drives a person toward appetite and desire. Not the pull of hunger or lust or jealousy or pride. They exist in a state of intrinsic obedience. Their nature and their function, they cannot be other than what they are, which is precisely why some among them struggle to understand human weakness. The Quran records this directly. When God announced his intention to place a halfa, a vicegerent, a steward on earth, the angel said, "Will you place upon it one who causes corruption and sheds blood, while we declare your praise and sanctify you?" That was not a challenge to God's authority. It was a question. A genuine, bewildered question from beings who could not map their own experience onto the human condition. They could not understand why God would choose this, a creature of clay and contradiction, when they themselves existed in perfect alignment with the And so God, in one strand of the scholarly commentary on the Harut and Marut narrative, gave 2 of them the opportunity to understand it from the inside, to walk in flesh, to feel desire, to face temptation with full, complete, unambiguous knowledge of what the right choice was, and to discover in the only way such a thing can be discovered, whether knowledge of the right choice is enough to make it. This is not a small question. It is, in many ways, the central question of the entire human moral project. Can we think our way into righteousness? Can understanding the right path guarantee we walk it? Harut and Marut were sent to find out. Why Babylon? Because Babylon was the world capital of exactly this problem. We know from archaeological record from the cuneiform libraries recovered from Nineveh and Nippur and Babylon itself, from the great Maklu incantation series, from the astronomical diaries of the Babylonian priesthood, from the thousands of ritual tablets now housed in the British Museum and the Pergamon in Berlin, that Mesopotamian civilization had developed one of the most systematic and institutionally supported magical traditions in human history. They had categories. They had theory. They had professional guilds. There was Makal magic, elaborate fire ritual for dispelling witchcraft and malevolent sorcery. There was Namburbi ceremonies designed to avert bad omens, read in the stars or the entrails of animals. There was Urpu purification through fire and incantation, and there were the practitioners themselves, the Aipu, the ritual exorcist, the Brewer, the diviner who read omens, the Mamu, the incantation priest. Magic in Babylon was not underground. It was not hidden. It was a licensed, regulated, respected profession with institutional training and royal patronage. The court of Nebuchadnezzar employed these practices. The palace records document their salaries. The library of Ashurbanipal, the great 7th century Assyrian king, contained tens of thousands of tablets, and a significant portion of them were magical texts. This was the intellectual and spiritual environment into which God sent 2 beings who carried the definitive, authoritative, divine understanding of what magic how it actually works, and what it actually costs. Not to compete with the Babylonian practitioners, not to establish a rival school, to expose the entire enterprise, to hold up a light so clear and complete that every person in Babylon would be able to see, without ambiguity, exactly what they were choosing when they chose. The greatest possible warning requires the greatest possible clarity, and the greatest possible clarity requires the right city. Babylon was the right city. Why magic? This question runs deepest, because it forces us into territory that the modern mind finds uncomfortable. The Islamic theological position that magic sir is real, not metaphorical, not psychological suggestion, not the placebo effect dressed in ancient costume. Real operative cause and effect, manipulation of reality through, means that operate outside the natural order as we understand it. But, and this is the crucial theological distinction, it operates only by the permission. The Quran states this explicitly in the very verse we are examining. But they do not harm anyone through it, except by permission of Allah. Magic is not a rival power to divine authority. It does not exist in competition with God. It is, rather, a tool like fire, like poison, like any powerful and dangerous instrument whose use severs the user from God even as God continues to govern the outcome. The one who learns magic, uses magic, chooses magic as their instrument. They are purchasing something. The verse tells us this directly, and what they are purchasing it with is their share in the next life. And they knew that whoever purchased it would have no share in the hereafter. They knew. The knowledge was not hidden. The price was not buried in fine print. They knew, and they paid it anyway. This is why the teaching of Harut and Marut was not about empowering the people. It was about showing them completely, undeniably, with full divine authority, exactly how this transaction works. Here is the mechanism. Here is what changes in you when you use it. Here is what you are trading, and what you receive in exchange, and what the ledger looks like at the end. By showing the full reality of magic, by making its costs visible and undeniable, they gave humanity the most complete possible basis for refusing it. The tragedy is not that they taught. The tragedy is what humanity did with the teaching. Of all the applications of magic described in the Quranic verse, of all the things this terrible knowledge could do, the one specifically named is this: causing separation between a man and his wife. Why that? Why, out of everything dark knowledge can accomplish, does the verse choose the destruction of marriage as its example? Because marriage nikh in the Islamic tradition is not merely a legal contract. It is not an arrangement of convenience or social custom. It is a myth, a solemn, weighted, sacred covenant. That word myth appears in the Quran in only two contexts. God uses it to describe his covenant with the prophets, the most serious binding compact in the theological universe, and he uses it to describe marriage, and they have taken from you a firm covenant. Myth galida. A firm, weighty, solemn. God places between spouses, the Quran tells us, mawadda wa rahma, affection and tenderness. These are not feelings that arise from circumstance. They are placed, divinely installed into the structure of a valid marriage. They are a gift. To tear a marriage apart through magic is therefore not simply relationship sabotage. It is not just cruelty to two, it is a spiritual assault on a divine institution. It is taking the architecture of mercy that God has built between two people and using occult force to systematically collapse it. It is, in the Islamic framework, among the most destructive things a human being can do to another human being. And it is the example the Quran chooses. Not war, not murder, not theft. The destruction, because perhaps nothing reveals the nature of a corrupted heart more clearly than the willingness to use forbidden power against love itself. And the people of Babylon learned how to do it from angels, who warned them not to. That paradox is meant to disturb you. It is designed to disturb you, because the Quran is not describing an ancient historical scandal contained to one city in one century. It is describing the permanent, unchanging human relationship with forbidden knowledge. We are always warned. We learn anyway. And then we use what we learn to hurt each other. Harut and Marut did not create that pattern. They revealed it. Now we arrive at the part of this story that the scholarly tradition handles with because beyond the Quranic verse itself, which names Harut and Marut, confirms their descent to Babylon, and confirms the nature of their teaching there, exists a body of hadith narrations and exegetical literature that describes what happened to these two angels personally. And this material is layered, some of it contested in its chain of transmission, and all of it staggeringly consequential if received correctly. The tafsir tradition, the great commentaries of scholars like Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi, engages with narrations attributed to companions of the Prophet describing the following: that Harut and Marut, while in human form in Babylon, were themselves tested. A woman of extraordinary beauty came to them. Named in some accounts as Zuhra, the planet Venus, she appears in the narratives as a point of rupture. In some versions, she sought to learn from them. In others, the encounter was of a different nature entirely. The narrations vary in their details, and scholars debate their grading with precision and care. What the strongest narrations converge on is this: there was a moment of profound temptation. A choice. And the choice, whatever its exact nature, had consequences. The consequence recorded is this: Harut and Marut were offered a choice between punishment in this world or punishment in the next. They chose this world. And so they remain suspended in a pit beneath the earth of Babylon until the day of judgment. Still teaching, still warning, still saying to anyone who comes to learn from them the same words they have said from the beginning: we are only a trial. Do not disbelieve. Sit with that. Two celestial beings, created from light, possessed of knowledge, we cannot fathom choosing earthly punishment over eternal consequence. Choosing to bear a known, finite, temporal suffering rather than face the alternative. This is not a simple story of failure. The tradition, in most of its strongest forms, does not read this as straightforward angelic sin. What it is a demonstration of the breathtaking weight of the choice that stands before every soul. Even beings of light, placed inside the conditions of flesh, discovered that knowledge of the right choice is not the same as making it. And God Al-Adl, the perfectly just, honored the sincerity of their choice to accept this world's punishment. There is mercy in the fact that they were given the choice at all. And there is a reason this story, in all its weight, all its complexity, is preserved inside the most recited chapter of the Quran. A chapter Muslims read in every single prayer, every raka'ah, every day of their life. We are meant to sit with this. We are meant to return to it. We are meant to never quite be finished with it. We travel to the plains of southern Iraq, to the place where Babylon stood. What remains today is fragmentary and scattered and strangely moving. The Great Ishtar Gate was removed by German archaeologists in the early 20th century, dismantled, shipped across the Mediterranean, and reconstructed in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, where it stands today, impossibly blue, impossibly intact, impossibly far from home. The Etemenanki, the ziggurat of Babylon, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, possibly the structure that gave rise to the biblical memory of the Tower of Babel, is a mound of compressed mud brick, slowly returning to the plane it rose from, but the scale remains legible. still overwhelms. The processional avenue of Nebuchadnezzar II, the great boulevard that ran from the city's gates to the Temple of Marduk, extends for hundreds of meters even in ruin. The foundations of the palace complex cover an area that modern excavators have only partially mapped. The city walls, at their height, were wide enough for chariots to turn on their top. This was not a city. This was a statement. And in this city's libraries, recovered in fragments, translated with difficulty across the past 2 centuries, now distributed across institutions from London to Baghdad to Chicago, we find the texts. The incantation bowls, the ritual tablets, the professional manuals of the Ipu. We find a civilization that developed a complete and internally coherent cosmological system in which magic was not supernatural. It was technical. It was knowledge precise, systematic, transmittable knowledge applied with discipline and craft. Standing here, in the dust that was Babylon, the story of Harut and Marut stops feeling like allegory. It starts feeling like testimony. Here, right here, on this earth, under this sky, divine knowledge was given to human beings specifically to test them. And right here, human beings failed that test in the most recognizably, most painfully human way imaginable. They understood everything. They remembered the warning. They knew the cost. And they chose the power anyway. The ruins around us are, in some sense, what that choice looks like across the sweep of centuries. Babylon, the empire of the ancient world, the seat of human, the city that reached highest toward heaven is rubble and mud. The warning was given. The warning was heard. The warning was ignored. And here we stand in what remains. Here is what this story is actually about. It is not about magic. It is not about Babylon. It is not even ultimately about 2 angels suspended in a pit beneath the Iraqi earth. It is about the structure of temptation, the architecture of the human relationship with forbidden knowledge. And the single most important discovery this story carries inside it. God does not present human beings with choices that are easy to get wrong. The warnings are clear. The costs are stated. The consequences are visible. Harut and Marut in the story, in the verse, in the narrations literally said the words, out loud, to every person before teaching them anything. This is a trial. Do not disbelieve. This will cost you everything. And people learned anyway. Because knowing something is wrong fully, completely, unambiguously knowing is not the same as not wanting it. The human heart is not conquered by information. We cannot think our way out of desire. We cannot reason our way past. We cannot be warned sufficiently, educated completely, and then released into freedom as if the warning itself were the solution. This is the discovery the angels made in Babylon. This is what they found when they stepped inside human experience. This is what, in some interpretations, cost them what it cost them. You cannot understand temptation from a position of you can only understand it from inside it. And you can only overcome it, the tradition teaches, through something that transcends information. Through taqwa, God consciousness, the awareness of being seen and known at every moment. Through tawbah, return, the recognition that you have veered, and the decision to, through the humility of accepting that your knowledge of the right path is necessary, but not sufficient. That you need help, that the help is available, and that asking for it is not weakness, it is the beginning of wisdom. Harut and Marut are still in Babylon. Right now, still teaching, still warning, still saying the same words to whoever descends to them in that pit. We are only a trial. Do not disbelieve. And we are still, generation after generation, century after century, civilization after civilization descending to learn what we have already been told not to use. The trial is not ancient history. The trial is Tuesday morning. The trial is the choice you make when no one is watching and the thing you want is close enough to reach. The trial is and the only question that has ever mattered, the one Harut and Marut came to Babylon to ask, the one this single verse in Surah Al-Baqarah has been asking for 14 centuries, is the same one the Quran places before every human being who has ever drawn breath on this earth. Knowing the cost, knowing the full, true, unambiguous, clearly stated cost, what will you choose? If this moved you, share it. The most important stories are the ones we keep returning to. Drop in the comments, what does Harut and Marut story mean to you? And subscribe because we are only at the beginning of this journey.